yamamo akwaba shonko so eba POG Media. So message sa fe and I say waba a jumedian so subscribe like a jumedian share nema fufro and so and sa in can be kindly click on the notification bell so send a bear ye the any news we are to platform so I won't so wohu the echo and the air by yanko in some near fat in some dodonano and ye day embre wa ye bo at the era a OSP and a ye Cecilia.D kendo furiata any FBI omon sensama ayede abano na OSP a issue a statement bia chase enyagro wa chere FBI force ampagana yede yehun odin sam dodo na ena tuja yenko na yenkonkuti yensamwa OSP ede tuja bra o issue a letter no ede baya or the many exposes ababontin yenkonkuti.
Joining me in the studio is been combing through this report to try and piece the issues together. Then it's good to have you.
Always a pleasure being here, Alfred.
Fantastic. What's the special prosecutor saying? Let's go back into the. Let's start off with Cecilia.D.
Yes, right. yes. So, special prosecutor is essentially saying that the case against the former Sanitation and Water Resources Minister, Madame Cecilia.D, is not over yet, even though the OSP sometime in the past had discontinued the case against her in respect of corruption and corruption-related matters. There is a new development in which the new administration of IOCO has taken interest in the matter and they have requested for the docket. So in that respect, IOCO is proceeding to investigate the former Minister for Sanitation and Water Resources for money laundering and structuring. Alfred, it is important for us to put all these in context because there's been a lot of development in this particular case. But the facts themselves bear no repeating because we all know how we got here, how some cash was allegedly stolen from her house. Upon a complaint made to the police, it was discovered that there was a lot more cash that was stashed in her house, which got a lot of public attention. The special prosecutor got into the matter, investigated the matter, and at a point, the special prosecutor had to discontinue the matter. And that's where the conversation begins tonight, because as of July 2023, the OSP had been in an investigation routes. The office was doing so with FBI, and the focus of their investigation was in respect of corruption and corruption-related matters. According to the OSP himself, even though this investigation started somewhere in July 2023, by October 2023, that the matter had become a transboundary matter. It meant that part of or a leg of the matter was beyond the boundaries of Ghana, for which they needed to cooperate with some international agencies.
Right.
The FBI was one of those agencies in which that collaborated with them in respect of that investigation. That after 7 months of that investigation, they came to a conclusion that the matter was actually within the province of money laundering and structuring. But mind you, they were investigating her and associates for corruption and corruption-related offenses.
Right.
Let's see what happens when they reach that conclusion after 7 months of investigation, investigating that matter. So by January 2024, OSP, having taken a decision based on the findings of that investigation, discontinued the matter in respect of corruption and corruption-related offenses against Madame Cecilia.D,
which was the focus or the scope of the investigation.
That was the scope of the investigation.
Okay.
Yes, so by January 2024, the OSP then referred the case to the Economic and Organized Crime Office to commence investigation into the money laundering and structuring. Mind you, their investigation showed that the matter was within the province of money laundering and structuring. And these are the direct mandates of IOCO, for which they referred the matter to IOCO in January 2024.
Okay.
Now, by May 2024, IOCO, having taken that docket, also decided to do its work. But along the line, they sought advice from the Attorney General, then Attorney General, Godfrey Ademi, who gave an opinion on the nature of the matter and gave an advice. And that advice was to the effect that the matter had no predicate offense for which they were going to mount the investigations of money laundering and structuring on. In other words, they needed to exist, in the view of the former Attorney General, an offense whose proceeds will then be traced to some other persons who perhaps will have concealed them or disguised them, which is basically what money laundering is all about.
Right.
and that to the extent that they could not find any predicate offense, they could not proceed with the matter by way of investigation by EOCO.
That was the former AG's advice.
That was the former AG's advice. That advice was taken by the former EOCO leadership, and then they acted on that advice by forwarding the docket back to the OSP. Now there comes a new leadership at EOCO, which has taken interest in this particular matter, perhaps because they didn't agree with the former Attorney General's advice and the former administration of EOCO. Now they requested for this particular docket, and the OSP has forwarded same back to EOCO. So as it stands now, it is the case that the new leadership of EOCO has taken interest in the matter, and they are proceeding to investigate that particular matter. The OSP has pledged its readiness to support EOCO in respect of this particular investigation. So Alfred, on the totality of it, this is where we are with the matter. It does not seem closed as was earlier reported sometime by the OSP himself when they had said that they could not find any immediate and direct evidence in relation to corruption and corruption-related matters. And also that the docket was returned to them. It didn't end there. This new administration has taken interest in the matter. They are proceeding with the investigations.
But let's stay the steam on this, because you make some instructive derivations which bring some clarity to what we're talking about. The focus of the OSP's investigation in the matter of Cecilia.D was for corruption and corruption-related offenses.
That is right.
Reason why they even brought in the FBI. So it would also then mean that the FBI's focus in collaborating with the OSP was for the corruption and corruption-related offenses.
Precisely so.
When they then realized that there could be some, suspicion of money laundering, did that also form the FBI's involvement in this? As far as we do know,
that is not information that is publicly available.
Okay.
But what we do know was to the effect that when the OSP set out to investigate the corruption and corruption-related aspect of the matter, which at the point was transboundary, for which they needed to cooperate with the FBI, the focus was on corruption and corruption-related offenses.
Which they didn't find.
However, according to the OSP, on the totality of the evidence that was gathered at the point of investigation, it pointed that the matters in question were those that relate to money laundering and structuring. Now, mind you, money laundering and structuring are the direct mandates of EOCO.
Okay.
For which OSP says, okay, I have done my part. This leg of the investigation is best carried out by another state institution directly mandated to do so. And that was the basis on which they had to forward the docket to EOCO in January 2024.
No, but I'm going to come to you on it, because we need to understand what the money laundering really is and what structuring is as per what the law says, okay? And whether that constitutes corruption as well. Because then if you're investigating corruption and corruption-related offenses, and unless you, by the definition of the law, money laundering is not corruption, structuring is not corruption, then you can conclude that the OSP took a different position on this. But Adam Senano is the co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption, joining us on Zoom. Then stay with me. Senano, good evening. Thank you for joining us. I mean, and I bring you in at a point where we see the EOCO taking different positions under different leaderships. The previous EOCO leadership did agree with the Attorney General's advice then that really there was no reason to look into Cecilia.D's case with the angle of money laundering. A new EOCO leadership comes in, led by Raymond Acha. They say, you know what? We're interested in this case. In fact, we believe that it is worth looking into that angle of money laundering as against the previous leadership's position. I mean, how does these two positions by two different leaderships strike you for the same institution, by the way?
Well, thank you very much, Alfred. Truth be told, when EOCO took the original position, many of us who had read through the EOCO law were quite befuddled as to how they could arrive at that conclusion. It was very curious why they would even seek the AG's interpretation of something that on the surface was very clear, that when you have assets and resources that could not be legitimately, determined as to where you got it from, they should be considered as the proceeds of crime, and therefore the state could step in. It's a very clear aspect of their mandate. So I'm not too surprised that the current leadership has decided to take a keen interest. Many of us told Yoko and his leadership that they were shirking their responsibility as far as the law was concerned. So I'm not too surprised. Yes, it may be an issue of interpretation, but I think that the law is quite clear.
I see, but now how do you expect this to play out with the renewed focus and interest that Yoko, the new leadership of Yoko, are taking in this particular case of Cecilia.D and the pursuance of that investigation of possible money laundering?
I think that, first of all, the OSP has done the base work, and so the docket, as they pointed out, they have given a copy of the original one that was given to Yoko for the current leadership to look at. I am sure that what they will do is just to highlight the law. I think the law speaks for itself. So it is not a case of somebody.
Yo, Meda was to say, wash your Jumedi no ABC Simi, Mr. Mo. Subscribe, like a Jumedi and share. Nema for friends and can be kindly click on the notification bell on the any news be out of platform no swam. Also, one who dear air call and a dear air bar. Or from you know. Yo chimu for no echemu edin some dodo na yede etu dwa ye pepese ye beko na yakwa kuti yen some or the yede wodi to ye yanko ne yankon kuti e your family no.
They are attempting to witch hunt. This is what their law says. This is what their mandate says. And to the extent that the individual could not provide evidence of the legitimate sources of these excess monies and assets, the state was bound to take an interest and then draw a certain conclusion. If by virtue of the work done by the OSP, they're able to demonstrate that these monies were flown into the country or came in from source A or B, and the monies originated from certain activities where you can draw the conclusion that this is money laundering, that's what the investigation will end up with. I think that clearly this case is not yet completed or concluded, and the work that is likely to be done is what will bring us to a point where we can say this is the situation, and if some persons have to be sanctioned, that will happen.
Zan, appreciate your time on this. Thank you. And if you could kindly stay with me, Dennis, what is the position of the law in terms of definition of what constitutes money laundering and structuring, essentially, and whether that's also or can be considered as an act of corruption?
Well, so our laws are clear. They try to distinguish what is corruption and corruption-related offenses and what constitutes money laundering. So you would see that when you look at the OSP Act, they are talking about the OSP having a mandate to look at corruption and corruption-related offenses, as has been spelled out in our criminal code. In the criminal code, you see corruption of a public officer or corruption by a public officer. All those come under the mandate of the OSP. And in fact, when you look at our Public Procurement Authority Law 2, there is an element of corrupt practices where you put yourself in conflict of interest and matters like that, where you stand to benefit from those things. Those are purely matters of corruption and corruption-related offenses. However, when you look at our Anti-Money Laundering Act, it clearly defines anti-money laundering to mean that you are in the possession of some property which is proceeds of crime, and that you knowing that it's a proceeds of crime, you have decided to disguise it for purposes of changing its nature. So that's how come the previous administration, on the advice of the Attorney General, says that when you say it's a proceeds of crime, then that means that there has to be an existence of a crime first before we can talk of its proceeds. So the money laundering matter is that, yes, you are in possession of proceeds of crime, but that you have taken steps to conceal or to disguise that proceeds of crime, just that authorities do not detect it. I mean, structuring is just a shade of it, where, for instance, that you are supposed to, if you know that you would deposit a certain amount of money, for instance, into a bank account and it will be detected, then you split the money into smaller pieces. That is just structure of getting around the reporting system or it's being flagged.
I see.
So those are matters of financial crimes, if you want to put them that way, money laundering and then structuring. But corruption and corruption-related matters are those that are earlier explained.
And Ms. Ano, you had indicated, you were the view at the time, I recall, that the Yoko didn't need a predicate offense before getting into investigating Cecilia.D for alleged money laundering, correct?
Yes, we were of the view that they didn't need that because the thing was that are there assets and resources and monies that cannot be legitimately, whose source could not be legitimately determined? Is there an individual who cannot explain the divergence or disconnect between how much they have available in assets and resources compared to their remuneration? And this was a public officer whose remuneration we were all clear about. And yet there were hundreds and thousands of dollars and other foreign currencies found, for which no explanation was given. So immediately it fell under that portion of it. The aspect of, is it a proceed of a crime, is where you then get into the investigation. And that's where the advantage of the OSP having collaborated with the FBI to draw a certain conclusion for us was valid. That if the FBI in their country could say, look, from what we have investigated, it seems that this is so and so and so. It means that there was enough information for you to then say, let's proceed and then determine what has happened. For that reason, the initial position they took, for many of us, that certainly was not what the spirit and the letter of the law was trying to get us to do.
And I do appreciate you, Mr. Addo. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight.
And thank you for having me.
Perfect. He's the co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. There's another issue of interest as captured in the OSP's half-year report, and that was on Kenneth Danaya Kuntunkunun Conferiata. What's the latest on that?
Well, so, Alfred, you do recall that the OSP has been on the heels of the former finance minister, trying to get him to answer some questions in respect of some matters, including the petroleum and mineral revenue assurance, the electricity company of Ghana termination contract, the National Cathedral project, the ambulance project, and then the GRA tax P-fund management. But along all the conversation, we have not specifically been told what exactly the role of the former finance minister is or was, for which reason he's wanted to respond to some of these things. In this particular report, the OSP gives us an idea of some of the things that the former finance minister is wanted. And if you would indulge me, let me just quickly run you through some of the things that has been indicated in that particular report. So, portions of the report reads that Ken Oforiatta is alleged to have directly influenced the procurement to obtain unfair advantage to SML in revenue assurance in the downstream petroleum sector, upstream petroleum production and minerals and metals resources value chain. So this is in respect of the SML deal. This is the first time we have been told exactly what the role of Ken Oforiatta was in that particular transaction for which he's wanted to answer questions. There's also the issue about the former finance minister allegedly directly influencing the procurement to obtain unfair advantage in contractors and materials for the National Cathedral project of Ghana and unlawfully approving payments for such contractors. That is in respect of the National Cathedral projects, one of the reasons for which he's wanted. And also is alleged to have unlawfully padded approved payments in respect of the termination of a distribution, loss reduction, and associated network improvement project contracts between the Electricity Company of Ghana and BXC. This is in respect of the ECG contract for which he's wanted. And also that he's allegedly unlawfully approved payments out of the tax refund account of the Ghana Revenue Authority. So this particular report gives us a fair idea of the reasons for which the former finance minister is wanted. We now know that he's been declared wanted. And
absolutely,
we have a sense of the reasons for which he's wanted, at least per this particular report.
And it gives some flesh to what the OSP has been talking about.
Precisely so.
And then the instance of the BXC says what? On the matter of what? Padding.
Yes.
All right.
Unlawfully padding approved payments in respect of the termination of a distribution, loss reduction, and associated network improvement project contract. Yes. So the allegation is unlawfully padding approved payments.
And you know, by the finance terms, we talk about padding. It's more like the practice of just inflating the a budget, or essentially either by overestimating expenditure or by underestimating revenues. So that's that act that it talks about.
That
It
is
will
so.
be interesting for the OSP to give some further and better particulars beyond this, and then we'll all get to know how.
But of course, the
things will
OSP
play out.
has reiterated that he's taking the necessary steps to get the finance minister arrested wherever he is. You know, he's currently been put on a wanted list. He's also reiterated some of the cases that are before the law courts, at least two applications from the former finance minister having been dismissed by the courts, one in respect of the interlocutory injunction and the other in respect of a judicial review application that he had put before the law courts. So, Alfred, I mean, this is just a piece of the entire document that the OSP has been talking about. He's also been making some recommendations to the Constitutional Review Committee, wanting a dedicated chapter on corruption in the Constitution. There's a lot more to discuss in respect of this particular report.
Indeed, rightly so, and we'll sink our teeth a bit further.
Meda was bio say washe dwumadi no ABC Cecilia nyam popon inshaw say de bia no oni POG Media yemudi eyetas we de na de bia wo hwe ye dwumadi no e de my POG Media de mo amunim say ye no mo say de bia eya ka kire mo subscribe mo like dwumadi no na mo share na mo ma afoforo enso ensa enye de enka bi by sharing it de bia no kase bon ye de do na ba de e bebre mutim se mo mo jebre na mo hwe POG Media mfama nyam hwa mu nyina makramo.